Suddenly, I was facing a permanent game over 90% of the way through the game. I actually had to resort to stealing from a homeless character just to survive until the end credits. Welcome to the first episode of FourScore. This is a new series where I take 4 games with a shared theme, review them, and then rank them all at the end using my 4-quadrant leaderboard. Recently, there's been a massive wave of narrative adventures, literally one new release every week for a month. I love this type of game because they prioritise great characters and tough choices without demanding weeks of your life. You can usually wrap one up in a single weekend. We're going in release order, starting with Tides of Tomorrow from the team at gimmick. This one caught my eye last year with the striking neon colours and the unique hook. You can see glimpses of choices other players made before you. Since I loved their previous game, Road 96, my expectations were high. I even picked up a physical copy the same day that the game launched digitally, which feels increasingly rare these days. Very reasonably priced too. The world of Tides of Tomorrow is completely flooded. Humanity survives on floating islands made of trash, bartering for every scrap. There's a disease called plastemia threatening everyone, caused by microplastics entering the bloodstream, and the only treatment, a drug called ozone, is running out. It also just happens to be controlled by some rather nasty characters. That online system that I mentioned is more than just a gimmick. Seeing other players' paths can give you a password or block a route entirely, making every playthrough feel different. In fact, you'll likely only see about 60% of the story on your first run. It plays a lot like Road 96, where you choose between a few locations to meet and help a handful of fleshed out characters. The real surprise for me was the survival mechanic. You start the game dying of plastemia and have to scramble for ozone immediately. For the rest of the game you're constantly managing your health. It adds a great layer of tension. I thought I had it under control until I got cocky. I was hoarding 2 canisters of ozone when pirates ambushed me and stole it all. Suddenly I was facing a permanent game over 90% of the way through the game. I actually had to resort to stealing from a homeless character just to survive until the end credits. Tides of Tomorrow is a thoughtful, tense experience, and I highly recommend it if you want a story that keeps you on your toes. But sometimes you don't want to be on your toes. Sometimes you just want to put on a pair of headphones, lean back, and drown in a specific aesthetic. That brings us to our next game, Mixtape. This is a game that is absolutely dripping with style. From the moment the first track kicks in, it's clear that the team of Beethoven and Dinosaur have created a visual and auditory masterpiece. It's set in that nostalgic, hazy version of the 90s that feels more like a memory than reality. If we were ranking games purely on vibe check, Mixtape would win easily. The soundtrack is astounding. It's the kind of game where you'll want to look up the track list the seconds the credits roll. However, there is a catch. Mixtape is only about 3 hours long, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is a very thin 3 hours. The biggest hurdle for me though wasn't the length, it was the main character. I found her genuinely obnoxious for the first 2 hours, which is a lot when the game is only 3 hours long. But I started to realise that this was a deliberate choice made by the developers. Without spoiling the specifics, the final act challenges her perspective in a way that actually made me start to warm to her. It's a brave narrative choice, but you have to be willing to sit through some friction to get to the payoff. But where Mixtape succeeds by leaning into its own unique style, our next game, Aphelion, is a bit of a heartbreaking example of what happens when a renowned studio loses its way in the genre it helped define. I've been a huge fan of Don't Nod for years, so I was genuinely looking forward to seeing their take on a new adventure, but Aphelion, well, it's a struggle. The biggest issue is how restrictive it feels. For a studio that usually excels at making your choices feel heavy, this game is incredibly linear. It's a narrative game where the story feels like it's on rails, and not in a good way. To make matters worse, the 2 main characters are quite frankly dull. The fact that they spend almost the entire game separated from each other on a desolate, hostile planet doesn't help matters either. When your only conversational partner for 5 hours is yourself, the dialogue tends to get repetitive fast. Combine that with some very annoying stealth gameplay that feels like padding, and you have a game that's a tough one to recommend, even for die-hard fans. You want to be wrestling with the moral dilemmas, not wrestling with clumsy stealth mechanics that lead to you getting killed repeatedly. This makes 2 misses in a row for Don't Nod, with their last game, the 2-episode Lost Records Bloom and Rose, feeling overlong and melodramatic. That leaves us with the heavy hitter, the one we've been waiting years for. It's the sci-fi pivot for supermassive games. But does it live up to the gold standard set by House of Ashes? Let's talk about Directive 8020. Visually, this is exactly what you'd expect from the Dark Pictures team. It's polished, cinematic and atmospheric, although not quite as big budget and flashy as their top tier games such as Until Dawn and The Quarry. Under the hood though, it feels like a collection of sci-fi horror cliches we've seen a dozen times before. It's a very safe, very formulaic mashup of Alien and The Thing. The real issue for me was the consistency of the writing. While some of the cast made such bizarrely stupid decisions that I found myself rooting for the monsters, there were a couple of standouts. Brianna Young, played by Lashana Lynch, gives a solid performance that carries a lot of the weight, and Samantha Cooper also stands out as a genuinely capable and sensible Marine. The game does eventually find its footing. The tension ratchets up significantly towards the end, when the alien entity finally reveals its true, disgusting, multi-limbed, broken self. In the final hour, every quick-time event feels heavy with the risk of a quick, violent death. The problem is the game takes far too long to get there, and by the time it does, you've already sat through hours of predictability. So, we've played them all. 4 narrative adventures, 4 very different experiences. Now it's time to put them on the leaderboard and crown our winner. In the Wood ranking, our runner-up is Aphelion. Between the dull characters and the frustrating stealth, it's another miss for Don't Nod. The Bronze ranking goes to Directive 8020. It would be fine as a weekend title if you're a die-hard horror fan, but it's too formulaic to stand out. Taking the Silver ranking is Mixtape. It is a sensory masterpiece with a soundtrack that I'll be listening to for months. If you can push through that initial friction, the payoff is worth the ride. But the Gold ranking, and the one game I think you must play this month, is Tides of Tomorrow. It's the only game on this list that truly tried something new. It's thoughtful, it's tense, and it's exactly what I want from a modern narrative adventure. But what do you think? Did you find the lead in Mixtape as obnoxious as I did, or am I just getting old? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next episode of FourScore.